Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's program, Love Brought Me Through the Holocaust, Stories Survive with Judith Koeppel Steel. My name is Sydney Yeager, and I am the Public Programs Coordinator at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. Now in its 25th year, the museum is committed to the crucial mission of educating our diverse community about Jewish life and heritage before, during, and after the Holocaust. As part of that mission, our programs illuminate the stories of survivors, broader histories of hate and anti-Semitism, stories of resistance against injustice, and more. Thank you for joining us today virtually, but we hope you will visit the museum in person to see our new core exhibition, The Holocaust, What Hate Can Do, alongside our temporary exhibitions, Boris Lurie, Nothing to Do But to Try, which is running through November 6th, and Survivors, Faces of Life After the Holocaust from photographer Martin Scholler, which opened on September 18th and is still running now. You can learn more and find tickets on our website. We also appreciate the vital support of our members so much here at the museum. If you want to get closer to the museum and enjoy exclusive programs, member previews to exhibitions, and free admission, you can explore museum membership on our website or email membership@mjhnyc.org to learn more. Closed captions are available on today's program. Instructions on how to turn captions on or off will be posted in the chat, in addition to all the links I've mentioned. If you have questions for our speaker during the program, please put them in the Zoom Q&A box, and we will get to as many as we can at the end of the hour. Though I will be off camera during the program, I will be in the chat for any thoughts, questions, or needs. Today, we are honored to be joined by Judith Koeppel Steel. Judy was born in Berlin, Germany at the beginning of World War II. Her family escaped Germany in 1939 aboard the MS St. Louis, only to be turned away by both Cuba and the United States and sent back to Europe. Her family disembarked in Belgium and were later imprisoned in Gurs concentration camp. Judith's father arranged for her to be hidden by a French Catholic family for the rest of the war. In 1946, Judy came to New York, where she was adopted by her aunt and uncle, and ultimately she was ordained as a cantor. You can buy Judith's book, Love Brought Me Through the Holocaust, A Daughter's Memories, at the museum's online shop, which is linked in the chat. Thank you again for joining us today, and now I'm going to hand it over to Judy.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I was looking forward to this for a long time. I'd like to start by reading to you a letter that I wrote to my mother and father, and this is how I start my book. So it goes like this. Dear Mom and Dad, it is difficult to imagine the anguish that you must have gone through after having to give me up on that evening in September in 1942, when you knew you were going to be taken on a train to Auschwitz to an unknown fate the following day. I know now the strength you must have had when you took me to the Ose that night before and left me there to live. The horror of not knowing what was going to happen to Opa, to me, and for that matter, to you. I, as a little girl of 4, couldn't imagine, and all I wanted was for you to come back to me. Life would have been perfect for all of us. I understand how much you loved me and how much courage it took for you to give me up. Dad, I remember how you was distracting me for a second and letting go of my hand and leaving. It was in that split second that my life changed forever. I waited in vain for you to return to me, and Maman Suzy was there for me and dried my tears. I never stopped waiting for you and Mom and prayed every day for you to come back to me. I never recognized the emptiness that I had been feeling in my life without you, as well as the unexplained rage. This is why I'm finally writing this book. I believe that I am doing this to understand myself better, as well as getting in touch with that part of me which has been in pain and empty all my life. I used to ask myself, how did they go on the train? Did they get a seat? Did they actually go to Auschwitz? I hope they didn't suffer. What were they saying? What were they thinking? Did they worry about me? Probably. What about the lineup and who goes where? Did they stay together in the end? I hope so. Holding hands and lovingly gazing at each other, I asked myself, how come I lived and they did not? Writing this to you now, my beloved mom and dad, I understand a little more about myself. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your great wisdom, the wisdom to make sure that your message will carry on through me, my children, my 4 grandchildren, and as well as future generations. To educate my children and grandchildren, as all parents should do, to make sure that the Holocaust will never happen again. God was there to see that I survived, to tell my own story of survival and impart my experiences for the sake of peace for all future generations. Everyone in the world should visit Poland and the camps to see firsthand what happened and to know that these atrocities actually happened. I truly feel that all parents, no matter what race, creed, or color, should educate their children about this horrible time in history. I love you forever. Your Judith. So the beginning started when I was born in Berlin. I was born just before World War II started. There were beatings of Jews and the infamous Kristallnacht, the night of falling glass. This happened on November 9th and 10th, 1938, when the Nazis vandalized Jewish homes and businesses, torched synagogues, and killed nearly 100 Jews. Some 30,000 Jewish men were arrested, including my father, and he was sent to a concentration camp number 7, Fresnes-sur-Sarthe, in the northwest part of France. After 2 weeks, he was informed that he would be released on the condition that he leaves Germany within 8 weeks, or he and his family would be arrested. After the war, the camp, Fresnes-sur-Sarthe, was destroyed and rebuilt into a famous resort and tourist attraction. I was 14 months old when my parents and grandfather managed to book a passage on a luxury ship, the SS St. Louis, bound for Havana, Cuba. Aboard the ship, they felt safe and secure, not knowing that the St. Louis was to become a large prison. My parents' world was quickly changing. The ship stayed for 10 days in Havana Harbor, and only 22 souls disembarked. According to government officials, our visas were invalid and we were turned away. We tried to enter Miami, but again, we were told to move on because we were in violation of the US territory, according to the United States Department. I don't remember the trip itself. I was only 14 months old. So I'm reading to you what I was told by my aunt and uncle. We tried other countries, including Canada. When we asked the Minister of Immigration in Canada if he could accept at least some of the passengers, he replied, "None is too many." The ship finally returned to Europe and was allowed to port in Antwerp, Belgium. After that, we went to France, where we rented an apartment in a town called Nye in the Pyrenees. We stayed together until September 9th of 1942. Early one morning, or in the middle of the night, I remember this, there was a knock on our door. It was the Vichy police coming to arrest us. Why did they come to arrest us? Because we were Jewish. I remember my grandfather was in his bed crying uncontrollably. At that time, I didn't understand. I was only 4 years old at the time. I tried to console him as a 4-year-old child could. I said goodbye to him and went with my parents. I recall seeing my mom whisper something to our landlady, whom later I called Mama. I wonder, what did my mother say to her? What could she have said? We were taken to a detention camp in the south of France called Gurs. There, I remember soldiers standing with machine guns. After that, we moved to another camp called Rivesaltes. One day in Rivesaltes, my mother was playing with me, and I cannot forget the sadness in her eyes when she said to me casually, "Judy, Mommy and Daddy have to go away, and we don't know when we'll be back." Of course, a child cannot understand this, and I just wanted to play. As we played, the sadness in her eyes remained. Later that day, my father said, "Judy, let's go for a walk." "Okay," I replied, and my mother gave me a kiss, a quick kiss on the cheek, and cheerfully told us to have a good time. She gave me a quick kiss, actually meaning goodbye. My dad and I walked into the darkness until we came to a lit room somewhere where someone greeted us. They gave me something warm and sweet to drink. Maybe it was hot chocolate. I held my dad's hand with my left hand. He pointed to my right side in order to distract me. "Look over there, Judy." I looked to my right, and then I heard him say, "Just a minute," and he let go of my hand. My hand was picked up again, and when I turned around, someone else had picked up my hand. My father was gone, and I never saw him or my mother again. It was in that instant that my life changed forever. The next morning, I woke up to find Rivesaltes barracks empty. Maman's husband came for me and brought me back to his house. All the prisoners were put on trains to Drancy and then to Auschwitz. I was covered with sores when I came to Maman's house. Maman had to douse the sores with iodine. Maman's husband had picked me up from Rivesaltes after the prisoners left. I do remember screaming from the sting of the medication. My mom brought me to a doctor to look me over, and he said that I suffered from malnutrition and wasn't sure if I would survive. I believe my mom's loving and healing hands made me recover. I loved hearing my mom sing to me in different languages. I tried to imitate her, and I strive to be as beautiful as my mama. As she attended to my sores, dabbing them with iodine, she was also healing my broken heart by loving me unconditionally. Soon I became a little French girl who went to school and went to church. I sang hymns and made the sign of the cross. It was wonderful to be a part of that family. They made me feel safe and loved. From time to time, I would ask my mom, where are my mom and dad coming back? There was no answer. I remember one day in particular in 1945 when I was wheeling my mom's toddler son, Jackie, in his carriage down Côte Saint-Martin, where they lived. We were heading towards the center of town when suddenly I heard gunshots. We ran for cover into a jewelry store that was near the house. My mom came running to us, taking us back home to safety. We stayed in the house for a few hours. When the gunshots subsided, I decided to go back out and play. However, I was chased back by another loud sound, a pop. I never ran so fast in my life. The next day, our home and furniture factory were taken over by the Nazis. My mom feared that they would discover that I was Jewish because I had a German accent, speaking French with a German accent. Therefore, my mom made sure that I was dressed like a little French girl and told me not to speak, since she feared that I would give myself away. I would only smile and I didn't utter a word. One soldier told me that I was so pretty, just like my mama. It made me very happy since she was very beautiful. What a compliment for a 7-year-old child. I said, you see, you are really my mama. The war ended in 1945, and I had to leave the home I was so loved in for 4.5 years. I stayed there for another 1.5 years. Then the time came when Maman had to take me to Paris to the OSE headquarters. The OSE has saved many children during the war, but I wanted them to leave me with Maman. On the day that I left with Maman, it was dark and rainy. She took me to the OSE. I was so young and I wasn't aware of the danger that Maman's family took on by keeping me as their little girl. I didn't know the Nazis would have killed me because I was Jewish, and they would have killed Maman and her family for hiding me. When we got to the office of the OSE, Maman told me she had to leave me there. The news made all my fears of abandonment and rage resurface. It was the same feeling of my father leaving me, giving me away 4.5 years earlier. I begged Mama not to leave me, and it took 3 people to pry me away from her. I screamed at the top of my lungs, please, Mama, don't go. The pain of it was all happening again. The next day, I was taken to an orphanage called Villa des Glycines, where I stayed with other war orphans until the OSE was able to book me on the ship to America. I was told that I would live with my aunt and uncle and 2 cousins, and they were very rich. I also learned that in America, the streets were paved with gold. Through all this, I kept the hope that my mom would come back and get me. Years later, she told me she could not stop crying and felt her heart breaking that day, and life was never the same for her or for me. In August of 1946, I boarded the ship, the Atos II, that was bound for America. I was not happy. I caught some lice from the orphanage, and I feared that I would be thrown away like bad merchandise by my aunt and uncle. I remember going to the ship's railing and trying to shake my head very hard and every which way to get the lice off my hair. Of course, It wasn't possible. I found out later that my aunt and uncle took me to a doctor to get rid of the lice with medication. When we arrived at New York Harbor on September 9th, 1946, I was dazzled by the beautiful neon lights. Then we learned there was a dock strike, and once again, no one was allowed to leave the ship. However, the president who interceded on behalf of the 68 war orphans ordered a ferry boat to take us to shore. I was greeted by my aunt and uncle and their 2 children, who became my new parents and brothers. They didn't realize the heavy burden set upon me. I only spoke, read, and in French, and I wrote in French, and they spoke only in English and German. Therefore, there was no communication. I had to give up my French books, and I wasn't allowed to write or speak in French. This experience caused me to have various periods of depression, isolation, rage, and abandonment, with no one to speak about it. I was hoping and praying that my parents were still alive so they would come back and get me. It seemed like I'd waited for them forever. When I finally found out what happened to them, it was my aunt who told me they died in Auschwitz by gas. I lived in New York City in the 1960s with my husband. I was very much alone. I had already lost so much. I had been uprooted from my birthplace in Germany and then France. I had lost my mother and father to the concentration camps. I had lost my grandfather, and I lost my second mother, Mama, when I came to America. I lost my confidence, my faith in God. I was encouraged by a friend to buy a guitar and learn how to play it, and began experimenting with my voice. Through singing, I started to connect my head to my heart, my breath to my soul, and it felt very good to me. I taught myself many songs with my guitar, and I was especially drawn to songs in different languages. I especially became attracted to Hasidic music and love songs from the liturgy. I eventually met my first agent, who auditioned me in her home in front of her family and friends. She sent me out on singing jobs at different synagogues and different organizations, and started to share my Holocaust story. I performed and spoke in many places in this country and in Canada. I was inspired by a friend to meditate and met my first guru. It was then that I had to conflict with my spirituality and my religion. As fate had it, I met my rabbi, who spoke many times in our ashram. I heard he was going to be in Central Park, and I was anxious to meet this rabbi since I had guilt feelings, and I wanted to keep my Jewishness to honor my mother and father. He performed a Sabbath service, and he also said the things that my guru said. Therefore, I felt in harmony with his teachings, never instead of, always in addition to. I had the opportunity of chanting with his group, and he came up to me and said, "I like your voice." I thanked him, and he invited me to come and chant the wonderful songs I taught myself and the songs he taught me. He started calling me to attend his functions, and with his encouragement, I was privileged to assist him. I assisted him at a seminary and took his course and was ordained as an interfaith minister. And I performed many wedding ceremonies, baby namings, funerals, etc. In 1985, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and the doctor performed a complete mastectomy. The pain I felt was excruciating. A friend came to visit me in the hospital and put her hands on my shoulder where all the pain was. 5 minutes later, she left, and I felt the pain leaving my shoulder. This was my first experience with Reiki, a universal life force energy that can heal the spiritual, the physical, and the emotional. I was invited by her teacher, my friend's teacher, and received all 3 attunements after taking my Reiki 3, which was the master's degree. I was able to teach Reiki, practice healing, and attune my students. On Sunday in 1994, I had the privilege of marching in the Israeli Day Parade as one of the child survivors of the Holocaust. We were celebrating the anniversary of Israel. As we were waiting to march, there was a commotion, and I turned to see a man in a wheelchair being greeted with great joy by many people. He was the president of the organization, and although he had major surgery, his smile through his obvious pain drew me to his side. I introduced myself and extended my hand to him. I said, "I'm very honored to be here today. I was a passenger on the St. Louis with my parents." He in turn told me he was hidden in southern France. I said, "Me too." Then he said, "When did you come to America?" I said, "In 1946. He said, "Me too." I said, "On a ship, Atos 2. He said, "Me too." In September, we were 68 orphans. He said, "I was there too." We were 2 of the 68 orphans that arrived on that ship 50 years ago. He said, "I had boils on my skin." I said, "I had lice in my hair." He told me he had cancer. I said, "I'm a cancer survivor." When he mentioned he was looking for alternative healing, I blinked in disbelief. "I'm a Reiki healer," I said. And so Reiki is an ancient healing modality rediscovered by a doctor in Japan. "Are you in pain?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "in my legs." "Let's see what I can do." I began the healing, and we both reflected and were amazed by the similarities in our lives. When the healing session was over, I asked him if it helped. He smiled at me and he said, "I don't feel any pain." Then it was time to march in the parade. In 1991, I was invited to go to a hidden children's conference at the Marriott Hotel in Manhattan. This to me turned out to be a life-changing experience. Hearing the speakers on that first day, it touched the deepest part of my heart and soul and brought tears to my eyes. I was able to identify with so much that was said, as if they were speaking directly to me. On that second day, there was a luncheon with speakers that again tugged at my heartstrings. There were 22 people from Poland and France who had hidden Jews during the war, risking their own lives so that they may live. I felt that my sweet maman should have been there on that stage with these amazing saviors. It was then that an old longing to see Maman once more before it was too late. After saying a prayer and asking for courage, I dialed her telephone number and heard her voice saying, "Hello." In my broken French, I replied, "Maman, it's Judy. Maman, c'est Judith." She answered, "My little one, it's you." Then there was a mixture of joy and tears. I asked her if I could come to visit her in France, and she immediately responded, "Yes, my darling, come to me." In March of 1991, I set off to reunite with Maman. There was an instant recognition and tears of joy and hugs and kisses. Her eyes had sadness from the moment I had to leave her 46 years ago until now. She brought out a bottle of champagne to celebrate this joyful reunion. I told her how grateful I was to her for saving my life and risking her life for me. And she answered, it was the Christian thing to do. I could never have survived without her love. I made many trips of forgiveness, one of them being my trip to Poland and visiting Auschwitz, where my parents died. Before entering Auschwitz, we visited a Jewish cemetery that had been desecrated. It was heartwarming to see so many students of so many races, creeds, and colors taking shovels and working to erect the gravestones and fixing the graves that had been vandalized. What a sight this was. The following is a poem that was written by a friend of mine, David Rothblatt. In this mournful place, a somber one to see, a truly saddened space of anguish, reverie. What is the reason for this keep? No one will ever know. That children's tears and widows weep makes the flowers grow. That loved ones lie forever in sorrow beneath this earth, drenched in pain and the flood of tears, the flowers of their only worth. The wind blows quietly in this place and seems a gentle sigh, but as children's tears and widows weep, and the sound of the soulful cry. In the beginning of 1989, I received an invitation for a reunion of the St. Louis passengers. It was to be the first one of its kind and raised my curiosity. Who were my other shipmates? Where were they from? This was an idea of Mr. Herbert Carliner, another St. Louis passenger from Miami. Unlike me, Herbert had many pre-war memories. After all the trauma, his outlook on life remains so positive and so joyous. He is a great example of real heroism, of a true teacher. We have much to learn to be around him and his beautiful wife, Vera. On that weekend, we exchanged many photographs and stories, and mine was the least since I was the youngest. They used to call me the baby. However, I couldn't help but feel a special camaraderie or kinship with everyone as part of my own family. We share something interesting and unique. We were at the same place at the same time. On another one of our trips of forgiveness, we were invited to Washington, D.C., to the U.S. State Department for them to apologize for chasing the ship out of United States territory. In October 2018, we visited Canada, and we were invited by the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa to hear an apology from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He greeted each of us at a reception, which was given at the Parliament. He was very gracious. We were invited to Florida, Cuba, Hamburg, Germany, and Israel. These were very emotional trips. In Hamburg, we were given a reception by German Christians, asking for forgiveness for what their mothers, fathers, grandparents, and great-grandparents did during the Holocaust. They showed great remorse, and we accepted their apology. After that, we flew to Israel, where we visited Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Jerusalem. It was there that I visited the Garden of the Righteous and saw the names of Mama and Papa Enar on a large marble wall. As I reflect on my life, all 83 years of it, now 84, I feel that it's like a big jigsaw puzzle finally fitting into place. For so many years, there have been so many questions. Why am I here and why are they not? As my career started developing, I was given the answers. Destiny made it for me to live to tell the story. As I stand in a classroom full of students, some of them non-Jewish, most of them non-Jewish, as a matter of fact, I see in their faces a dream of a better tomorrow. I feel impressed with the depth of some of their questions, how straightforward they are, and how anxious they are to live, that they are to learn. What started for me as a singing career has become so much more. One of the students, a young man, came up to me and asked me to speak at his church. His eyes showed great sincerity, and I immediately said yes. Others came up to me to thank me for sharing that part of my life and express that they were glad that I was alive. I'd like to share some pictures, if I may. Well, the first one is a picture of my book, and there's also a picture of my mother and father. They're looking at each other with great love. And that's the reason I named the book Love Brought Me Through the Holocaust. I have documents, but well, if you read the book, you'll see what it says. I have here a document from the police president in Berlin saying you are ordered to leave the Reich within 8 weeks. In case you do not satisfy this order, you will be forced to leave. You will be forced to leave the Reich. You can protest this order by writing within 2 weeks. The protest will be decided by the police presidency, and the decision is final. And they were the ones who made the decision. I have a card here, a birthday card from my father to my mother. He was in a camp in the Fresnes-sur-Sarthe, and he sent a little birthday card. This is a picture of my parents, my grandfather, and myself. And this was aboard the ship, the St. Louis. Here's a picture of me on the St. Louis. I was only 14 months old. I hope you can see it. On this side is a picture of my parents with a friend. They had deck chairs there, and they didn't realize what was going to happen to them. I'd like to share with you a letter written in my father's handwriting, which I found, and I have the translation. This is my father's handwriting. And the translation is over here. I think it was very meaningful. My dear ones, as regretful as it is that a reunion will probably be a short one, we will not despair and will share the fate of the other 900 passengers. Hopefully, a way will be found to protect us from the ever-increasing proximity of the equator. It is already quite hot here and barely unbearable, especially in the ship's belly. The concept of humanness has sunk so low in the whole world that we cannot find a word for it. We hope to remain here, where our hope to remain here is very slender. That's in Cuba. And only a miracle or a stroke of luck can change the doubtful situation into reality. We will do the same as all the others on board. A solution for anyone in particular, is highly improbable. Also, the financial situation of any individual will not be of importance. This problem can only be handled by the joint. We cannot reproach ourselves that we were unable to obtain passage despite our strong endeavors. I tried every day to secure the Iberia, which is another ship, and they were glad to get this passage on the St. Louis. After all we went through, we deserve peace. We were not prepared for this affair. Also, the voyage, which we hoped would give us some rest, turned into a big excitement and strain because of Puppy's double middle ear infection. Otherwise, the voyage turned out okay with excellent weather, and we hope it will come to a happy ending. We enclose pictures of our baby, which is me. You can see how sweet she is. Misha is also sweet, and Opa, the grandfather, would love to go to the park with them. Please forward the enclosed letter, and they didn't have any stamps or proper envelopes, and they would hopefully pay them back. Meanwhile, best regards and kisses from Papa, Josie, Irma, and Puppy. But Puppy is a little dull. This is a picture of my father looking over the deck from the St. Louis. I'd like to pause now. Let me see what else I have. Oh, coming to America. This is a picture of me. The little girl in the middle with the hat is me. I was 8 years old in Marseille, and they took a picture there. This picture was given to me by the Ose. I'd like to show this picture of my two brothers and me. I didn't consider them cousins anymore. We played together and we grew up together. There's Henry, there's Micha in the middle, and me on the side in New York. This is a picture of me playing guitar with the rabbi and singing, doing Hebrew chants. Well, I think that, there's one more picture I wanted to show you. We went to see the Prime Minister Trudeau. So there's a picture of me with the Prime Minister. Let's see. And I have a copy of the apology from Canada that he read. There's a Prime Minister and I'm there in the blue outfit. And that's about it. I'll be open for questions and answers if you like.
Well, thank you so much, first of all, Judy, for sharing your story. That was really amazing to hear. And so I'm going to go ahead and say some of the questions that have come in as you've been speaking. So the first one that we got is, we know that you learned what happened to your parents, but were you ever able to learn what happened to your grandfather during the war?
During the war, shortly after that, he suffered a massive stroke. Was taken to a hospital run by nuns, and I had the opportunity to see him, and he was completely paralyzed, and he died shortly after that.
Let's see. And then we also got a question. How are you able to preserve and gather all of the documents and images that you have in your book, and specifically the letter from your father?
I don't remember. I think I know I donated a lot of the pictures and documents to the museum, but this was even before it was the museum. It was another name, and they remained with the museum. And when I decided to write the book, they made copies of everything. I did have a lot of pictures from somebody in France, Maman's stepson, who found these pictures and sent them to me in 2 bags.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. So you talked about how you came to the United States and then you were kind of forced to no longer speak French or anything like that, but do you still know French, or are you fluent at all in French or German at all?
I speak French, but very broken French. And German, I don't speak at all.
Okay. And did you ever think about returning to France to live there afterwards, or did you decide to stay in the US?
I returned to France 46 years after the war, and I went to reconnect with Maman. Maman passed away, and I had no reason to go back to France.
And can you also, we got a question, can you talk about how you met your husband? And if there's a story around that.
We were very young. I think I was 16 and he was 18. And we met, but I hadn't, you really want to hear this?
Only if you're comfortable talking about it.
I had a date and we went to a birthday party, and there was a bunch of boys there looking at us because I was all dressed up for the party and whatever. And he said, "Where's the party?" So I said, we're late. We have to go now. And then I said, "Goodbye, handsome."
Oh, I love
And that got to him, and they actually followed us to the party.
that.
I mean, they were harmless. In those days, it wasn't like it is today.
Mhm,
So somehow he got my telephone number from
mhm.
my girlfriend, and he called up right away, and we went out, and the rest is history.
Oh, I love that. So what do you hope that people take from your story? As I know you've been telling it for many years, and but what do you hope now that people take as you continue to tell your story?
Um, I I hope that well, the Holocaust should never be forgotten.
Mhm.
And I wrote about the uh, psychological effect that it had on me. First, by losing my father, then my mother, and my grandfather, and my mom and her husband, and these things stay. It's like. I mean, I went for therapy for that, for all the feelings of abandonment and well, the
Mhm.
negative feelings, all the negative feelings.
Mhm.
Um, but they do come up,
Yeah.
but they come up, but I'm able to deal with it and remember that, it's this is where I come from.
Yeah.
So yeah, it had the war itself had a tremendous psychological effect on me.
Mhm.
And I'm 84 years old now, and it continues.
Yeah. So was it, was it a painful choice to decide to tell your story, or um
Uh, it, I was told many times to write a book,
mhm,
and I said no,
yeah.
and I didn't want to write it. And finally, something in me said, this has to be shared with whoever,
Mhm.
and it took me about a year or so, to believe it or not, to get all the uh, pictures and documents, and my comments there. It took a while, but I'm glad it's out now, and I would like people to read it,
Yeah.
to see. Now it left a lot of scars,
Mhm.
and I just, with what's happening in this day and age, uh, there's no question that all the stories from survivors should be shared.
I agree. Yeah. And I think we have time for one more question. So can you talk a little bit about how the relationship between your aunt and uncle, and between you and your aunt and uncle, between you and your brothers, how that sort of developed over time, and what that was like?
Um, it was difficult for all of us.
Hmm.
I came with a lot of baggage,
Hmm.
and they had to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it was difficult for them,
Hmm.
as well as myself. But uh, as I grew older, we were able to come to terms, and they were very good to me. And as I said, my cousins are still my brothers.
Yeah. Well, Judy, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. It's really been an honor to be able to listen to it, and thank you so much for sharing those images, and being so open with us today. But I just want to ask, do you have any kind of final thoughts before we end?
Well, my final thoughts, what can they be? My final thoughts are my prayers for peace.
Mhm.
I have a great grandson now, and I want him to grow up in a peaceful world, a loving, he's got loving parents, loving grandparents and a loving great grandma. So this is my wish. This is my thought,
Yeah.
to wish for peace for the world.